Hello and welcome to another playthrough series. I'm starting up a little mini-series dealing with the American Civil War. I've got my 160th anniversary battles going along as well. We will be getting back to that shortly, but I've introducing one new game to the mix. And you can see here it's called Iron and Oak. I gave a little preview of this a couple weeks back. And I wanted to get this on the table as a little bit of a mini series. We're going to do a couple of scenarios from this to kind of give you an introduction to it. I've been playing through this with another friend of mine in a two-player mode, and I thought I'd do a couple of solo modes to solo games so that I could show you how it works and also do a little bit of a mini campaign here. Now, Iron and Oak, it's a GMT game, put out about 10 years ago. 2013 was when it came out. Designed by Jim Day, same person who's done Panzer and a handful of other games here as well. This game's really interesting. When it first came out, I was able to get it right off because I wanted to get into the naval side of the American Civil War, one area that you don't see a lot of action on. A lot different from a Gettysburg game or a land game based upon the Civil War. So I thought this would be interesting, and I really enjoyed it. It's kind of gotten mixed reviews over the years from people. I think it's really good. You've got to stick to the rules and stick to the way that it's played, and I find that it really can be quite exciting. It's definitely good as a two-player game because there is engagement on both sides during each turn. You're not you're not just letting one person go and then the other person go and so forth. There is good engagement over here. So I'm going to show you this and my little mini series on this. We're going to do two scenarios coming off of this, and the two scenarios are going to be dealing with the career of the most famous Confederate captain, Raphael Simmons, who was the captain of a couple of Confederate blockade runners. Well, not blockade runners. I shouldn't say that. No, they're not really blockade runners. They're more like raiders going after the commerce of the Union at the time. He commanded two ships. One, the Sumter, and the second one, more famous that most people hear about, is the Alabama. So there's two scenarios in here that deal with both of those, and we're going to play through both of them to show you how the game works and do this kind of as a mini campaign to see if we can either recreate history or not. And we're going to use Iron and Oak to actually show this because I think it's a really easy system. Really simple system. We can play through quite a bit of turns fairly quickly. It does showcase, my feeling, it does showcase the action quite well. There'll be a lot of firing back and forth, and get some damage here and there, but a lot of things are going to be bouncing off. We have a lot of mechanical issues that'll potentially slow things down. These ships they were state of the art of the day, but they were still clunky, and they still broke, and they still caused problems. And a lot of times they didn't make it to battle for whatever reason. So we'll talk about that more as we get into that. But what I want to do now is kind of just introduce the game, what it's all about, some of the components, and get things on the table and get set up for the first turn and get going with it. So first off, the game itself. Let me just give you a tour of the map. Right now you're looking obviously at the title graphic on the map itself, and just kind of walking you around. I'm going to zoom you out here a little bit and bring you over here and show you here is the turn track. You also see some shoal numbers down here. I'll explain those a little bit later. And we have wind and current over here as well. And then you'll notice, and I'm going to have to zoom way out for this so that you can see this, and tip the camera a little bit. There we go. There's our map board. A little bit different. This is not a hex encounter. This is more like square encounter. So we have C squares that will be mimicking either ocean or river, depending upon the scenario. We're going to be mainly playing the ocean, given the battles were with commerce raiders. They're going to be mainly out at sea, so we're not going to be dealing with that. But there are plenty of battles in here that deal with the Mississippi and the battles along there, as well as the Tennessee River and a little bit of the Ohio River there as well as the ports, the attacks on different ports of Mobile and such within there. So kind of generic in terms of this. Not very much terrain, although there is some that you can get later on in a older C3I magazine to add islands and things like that. The real crux of the game is the actual ships themselves. We have a couple of different things. Let me start with the counters. Counters kind of look like this, really kind of basic. Actually, bring the camera down here and try to zoom you in, and that's not going to zoom in very well, is it? Okay, so let's just do it the other way. There we go. Now you can see the counters. So very generic in terms of it. It shows the ship, the side, in this case the U.S., and then the name, Brooklyn. That was a sloop of war for the Union side. And then we have, just to show a Confederate ship, there's the Sumter. And you can see its silhouette. It's the Confederate naval flag and the name over there itself. Very generic in terms of what they look like. The reverse side is just a hidden marker, because we can have hidden units if you so choose. So those are the units. The real crux of, and those will be moving along the board as we move along. The real crux of it is going to be these things here in the middle. And let me reposition our camera here so you can see these, and move these together and move these over. There we go. I can get everything in the frame. Okay. So we have these units. And this is really the crux of it. As I said, this gives us all the statistics about the ships themselves. In this case, we're dealing with Brooklyn and the Sumter in terms of what we're going to play through. And along here, we have our maneuverability capabilities, number of hits, crew damage, its draft, how deep it goes. And then you can see there's a number of series of boxes along here that segment the different parts of the ship. You've got the bow and the stern and midships, covering the basic three. You've got waterline and then deck, and then also ram over here as well. This is where the defense factors come in and how well the ships get defended. And then we have a silhouette of the ship itself. This is actually our gun batteries up here, right here and here. This is the firepower factor of our ships. And then we've got in the bow and the stern modifiers for firing across the bow, firing across the stern. These numbers basically are the broadside. These numbers reduced give us the bow and the stern firing capability. And we have the same thing for the Sumter over here. Same numbers. You can see a little bit weaker in spots. Guns are a little bit weaker there as well. Same with the ram, because this was meant to be a commerce raider and not a sloop of war. From that, though, they've got a little better speed up here. You can see those numbers are a little bit better as well. Some special features here in terms of being vulnerable to canister, and then being a open blue water ship as opposed to a brown water ship that went on the rivers and coastal areas. So these are the heart of how we'll be fighting. This is what we'll be looking at. Oh, another thing here, this crew is a crack crew. Gives them a modifier on here as well. So there'll be also different counters that we'll use. I don't have them out here directly, but there will be a series of counters we'll use for damage and so forth and so on as we go along within there. Now you may say, well, what are these numbers all about? Well, and this is what's kind of unique for this particular game, is that these numbers correspond to dice. We'll put that up there, put that over there, put this over there, put this right here, and we'll put that right there. So the blue dice is a 10-sided dice, and that corresponds to our tens number right here. Green dice, 8-sided dice, 6-sided dice, and a 4-sided dice. Each one of these gets rolled for whichever thing we're doing here. So if we're defending in midships, we're rolling an 8-sided dice and getting a value. For shooting, we're rolling a 10-sided and a 4-sided dice. So in this case, we would use those two together and take the higher of the two numbers. In some cases, like if you look closely here at this, there's a 10-6-4. That would be where we're rolling a 10 and a 6-sided dice and a 4-sided dice for their maneuverability at that point. Okay. Once again, taking the highest number for that particular action. Okay. So the dice are the key things here because they will be used to actually control the variability of the game. Meaning that's what we're going to roll for firing, that's what we're going to roll for maneuvering, and we're going to be doing that to provide the variability to the game. Now we'll also have some cards which I'll explain later, but most of the variability will come from the dice. Now the dice comes in two flavors. There will be a challenge roll, which will be, say, firing a cannon. So if I do this, these two dice will fire, and they will be effectively a challenge roll. And then, let's say I'm hitting at midships, I will use this as a response roll to get a number. Okay, and the comparison of these two numbers will give us the result, meaning these numbers will be compared to that. Higher number wins, and then even from there, it'll be even more of a breakdown in terms of being how much higher one number is than the other. The same will be told true for maneuvering. So when we're maneuvering, the sumpter over here, like this first one, they'll use a 10-8. So they'll use those two dice, take the higher value, and then we'll also have a challenge roll, depending upon where they're moving, of some other dice to define what is going to be the response from there. And if they're, again, higher, they can move. If they're lower, they can't move. Again, simulating kind of that friction of battle, that friction of the early technology being unreliable, wind factors, other things like that, really been encapsulated into these dice rolls to make it much simpler and go very quick. You can see you'll be able to play turns very quickly with this once we get going with it. So that's a little bit about the game itself in terms of its mechanics and using dice to control most of it. It's a very simple sequence of play. I'll show you that real quick. Let's move these cards out of the way and try to zoom you in on this guy right here. So there we have it. Very simple sequence of play here. We've got a status phase, which is just checking for repairs and other sort of things. We've got an orders phase, which basically we just assign an order to our ships. And then we've got an action phase where they move and fire from there. And one side goes, then the other. It's an I go, you go type of movement. But as I said, there's going to be a lot of interactivity between the person who's not going and the person who is going at that point in time, because they will have to do response rolls to the challenges on there as well. And they can also play cards, as I'll explain here in a minute. Okay, so very quick. This actually goes very quickly. When I was playing with a friend of mine, 2-player, we were able to get in the heat of battle. One turn was taking us less than 10 minutes for both sides. That's for both me and him running. When it was very simple, when we're just trying to move or something, under 5 minutes per turn, if that. A lot of turns went much quicker within there as well. So that's, you can see the sequence of play. Now, we'll get into some of the other tables on here. Those are just tables to modify your dice rolls that are on there as well. We also have cards, which I was mentioning about before. I'll lay a few out here that will be used to either enhance or inhibit one side's actions, whether it be moving or firing. So you can see here I've got a handful of cards here, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get all these on the screen at one point and you'll be able to see them all. Let me try to do that. Hopefully that comes through properly. But you can see some of these cards. You've got, I've got 2 misfires on there. Oh well, that's okay. You've got incendiary shells. Obviously that's going to be bonus to somebody, but there is a chance for damage to your own guns. You've got a misfire, which can be played defensively to potentially minimize somebody's attack, one side's attack. You've got movement things here, like if you're on this one, springs. If you're anchored, you can use this to help with your firing within there. You've got maneuver cards, which actually adds a negative modifier to a unit, and there's other ones in there. I just want to give you kind of a sample of what these are. And these cards, each player gets a certain amount depending upon the scenario, and that's the only cards they get. They can't replace them, but what they can do is they can swap them out for a new card. In other words, you can say, I don't like these cards, I didn't play any, I'll turn one in, I'll get another one. Once you play it though, it's done. So if you've got 6 cards, you play a card, you've only got 5 cards left for the rest of the game. Play another one, then you've got 4, and so forth and so on. But in those 4 cards or 6 cards or whatever many you have, if you got one that you don't like, you could swap that out by turning that in at the end of the turn and grabbing a new one off the deck and kind of going from there. So that's another variable that helps players kind of do what they need to do for providing some variability to the game itself. The other set of cards that you have here, and this is really more for defining what the ships are going to do, are these what they call maneuver cards. Let's put this one out here as well. There we go. Alright, you've got these cards, and there's 2 decks of these, one for each side, which gives different types of maneuvers. Maneuver 2, Maneuver 0, spar and ram attack, to anchor or weigh anchor, Maneuver 1, drifting, so forth and so on. And these are used to actually order your ships. You'll place one of these cards with a ship, with each of the ships, at the beginning of your turn, and that will be the order for what it does in terms of maneuvering and trying to move themselves around the board within there. This just really kind of gives a player a chance to define what their orders are and do this before he moves his entire fleet. Now we're only going to be playing with 2 ships, so these are going to be fairly easy and fairly simple usage of these cards. But if you were having a whole fleet where you had 5, 6, 10 ships, then you kind of got to figure out, well, do I want this one going here? Do I want this going there? What do I want them to do? So those come more into play when you have larger fleets, but they'll still be interesting to use when we get there. So the last piece I want to talk about here is the scenario itself, and I'll show you what this scenario looks like. And here we go. So here's our scenario. Real quick over here, basic setup in terms of the board. Here's where the Union ship is going to be. Here's where the Confederate ship's going to be. It's actually entering the board. Definitions up here of what the ships are. Special rules at the bottom in terms of what's happening. So in this case, we're actually going to do the Brooklyn. This is kind of a unique scenario because there's actually 2 scenarios in one. We're going to have the Brooklyn going after the Sumter. And there's no turn limit on this. We will track turns just for sake of tracking them. But basic premise is the Sumter has to try to get off the board going across and get off over here. Union has to stop them, sink them, destroy them, put them under heavy damage, and they'll win the game there. So it's a very simple scenario. Should play pretty quick for us, and should be very very fun. I've played this a number of times. It's a good learning scenario, and a good game for starting it up. There has been, and last point I'll just make on this, there has been some criticisms on the game initially, and I think that's why it's kind of been put to the shelf by a lot of people. But I think it's actually a very good game if you give it a chance and give it the play by the rules as written. And I think you'll find that it actually plays pretty good. I'll try to point out, if we run into it, some of the main concerns on there. But for the most part, it's a very good game. It's a very enjoyable, quick playing game, as you'll see. And we should be able to get through this in a couple of videos, I think, once we get going with it. Because I think one thing you'll find with this, when damage occurs on these ships, it tends to get very heavy very quickly. When you get a good hit, it breaks down these defenses very quickly, and you start getting internal damage to the engines, to the water line, to other critical factors within the ship itself, and that tends to limit one side, and then the other side can come in for the kill. And what we'll be dealing with here is still wooden ships. These are actually still wooden ships. You can see by the wood colorings over here. It does have ironclads. You can simulate the biggest naval battle within the Civil War, Hampton Roads, between the Monitor, Merrimack, and the other U.S. ships in there. And those ironclads really, pounded out against each other. My friend and I played that one as one of the initial ones. Played out very, very well. A little bit different than history, and it was a good one. So you do have ironclads in here. You do have timberclads. You do have cotton-sided ships and other river boats, river-style boats that play through here as well. You can run the batteries at Vicksburg. You can fight Mobile Bay. You can fight New Orleans because there is rules in here for fortifications and attacking those, and dealing with all the detailed tactical naval situations of the American Civil War. So that's my brief introduction. Just wanted to keep this brief for you on the initial one. I'm going to move along to our second video, which is going to be the first half, hopefully the first half of the battle between the Brooklyn and the Sumter, and talking about Captain Raphael Simon's career in the Confederate Navy. Very interesting. I'll also later on bring in a couple books on the topic as well, which is very good companion reading for this, as well as the other companion game that does kind of more of the operational blockade of the American Civil War. That's the Rebel Raiders piece of it too, and that kind of ties in with this as well. I won't be playing that, but I just want to show you that there is quite a bit on, quite a bit wrapped up in those two games on the American Civil War naval history within there. So, hope you enjoyed this introduction, and I hope you stay tuned for first half of the battle between the Brooklyn and the Sumter. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye-bye.